It is so wonderful to be here, and I want to take a moment to invite you to look at the flowers on the pulpit and on the chancel as well. And we're so grateful that every week people bring these flowers to us. We have a practice that's developed over the pandemic, which is that after the service, we deliver the flowers to someone who might need a little encouragement or a reminder that we care that week. And it's something that became deeper in these last years and something that I really treasure. And last week, after our flower communion service and the annual meeting, many people helped deliver flowers all over our county and beyond to people. And yet there were still 3 people that I wanted to make sure got flowers. And so I was glad to see, after I came back into the sanctuary, that there were some flowers left, including some left on the altar by one of our wonderful floral artists. So I was able to take my little tour on the way home and drop off the flowers, and it was only right after I had dropped off the 3rd batch of flowers that the first person who I had dropped off flowers for texted me. LOL, they hadn't realized that one of the flowers was artificial until they tried to cut it. Good grief. By the way, I need to get those back, y'all. So today, we're speaking about imperfection, and I can say how nice it is to be speaking on something that I've been an expert on for so long. And especially this particular church year, this 21 to 22 church year, I have been so glad to be such a standard bearer for imperfection throughout this entire year. The thing is, everything right now, I think, in some ways for us seems a little bit flawed, a little bit off, just a little bit strange, even though in many ways things are kind of coming back into some natural rhythms. We live in that imperfection. You decide to pick up dinner on the way home and the restaurant is gone. You go to the other restaurant and that restaurant is also gone. You drive all the way to the grocery store and you realize you forgot your mask. There's a lot of heads nodding out there, thank you. You walk back into the house for the 5th time because you've forgotten something you need to bring to work, and the dogs just look at you like, you didn't have this problem during the pandemic when you worked at home, and plus you could let us out all day. But it's just that kind of a time. It's just kind of that time. So researcher/writer Brene Brown, and by the way, she likes to claim the slash in her title, wrote a book called The Gifts of Imperfection, and it came out initially in 2007, I think, and it was republished in 2020. And I listened to the first edition a few years ago, and yet it struck me, re-listening to it this time, that this is truly the time for us to embrace the gifts of imperfection, because this is the world we live in. So Brown, whose TED Talk on shame is one of the most watched ever, came to this work on imperfection through her research on shame, because shame and imperfection often travel down the same roads. We can talk, she says, about courage and love and compassion until we sound like a greeting card store, but unless we are willing to have honest conversations about what gets in our way in putting these into practice in our daily lives, we will never change. The world that Brown wrote about was the one we used to know. And in then, as in now, we face and often succumb to standards that we did not choose and which we may not even be conscious of. When we struggle to believe in our own worthiness, we hustle for it, she says. The hustle for worthiness is its own soundtrack. Those messages fuel never good enough in our hearts. Some of those expectations are that we know what is coming, that we know what to do, and we know how to do it well. As the child of a Nisei who began his elementary years in a detention camp, I know that hustle very well. I was trained in it in overt and covert ways from every moment of my life. And I know that hustle, and I don't mean the dance move, although I actually do know that, one of the few that I do know. But that's not the one I mean. It's the hustle of trying to be what the world thinks you should be. And it fuels our desires to try to be perfect. Now, we continue to live in a world that is so unpredictable, that we can't truly do anything perfectly. Often it's very hard to do things even well. And striving is more maddening than usual. Brown writes about how we push and how we are trained to be what other thinks we should be and how we keep pushing to get to that place. But instead of that, her research suggests we need a few other things. We need self-compassion. We need more acceptance of what is. And we need to practice gratitude as a spiritual practice. This is what we need in a time that also requires us to think about being more vulnerable. And she defines vulnerability as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. It's that unstable feeling, she says, we get when we step out of our comfort zone or do something that forces us to lose control. That would be a lot of the last 3 years. Fear of falling keeps you small. For those of us who continue to grapple with issues of how we embrace trust and how we can be part of a meaningful routine in the world as it is today, we need to understand that this is a world in which old solutions often do not fit the problems we face today, and we are going to often need to fail forward, as they say. So celebrating those wrinkles, as Laura Zucker invites us to do, might be a really good way to do that. If we can't be perfect, what is left? Well, creativity, joy, play, which happens to help counter perfectionism, by the way, just being playful and spontaneous. Oh, and authenticity, which has already been mentioned today. This is what Brown says about authenticity. It is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. Choosing authenticity means cultivating the courage to be imperfect, set boundaries, and allow ourselves to be vulnerable. Exercising the compassion that comes from knowing we are all made of strength and struggle, and nurturing the connection and sense of belonging that can only happen when we believe we are enough. When we believe we are enough. That really could truly be a different way of acting. Authenticity, by the way, is a great model for parenting. Though Brown's research may seem uplifting, or some may even feel like it's a little bit fluffy, she speaks in her book of a disturbing thread, which is growing evidence that children are being raised who are not at all able to handle disappointment because they feel as if they need to always be able to achieve, or else they will in some way be not enough. And this is a very disturbing trend. She talks about this at some length. Maybe the best way to start is with your own self as a parent or grandparent or beloved friend to some children in your life. Brené Brown says it's clear from the data that we cannot give our children what we ourselves do not have. Authenticity is a collection of choices we have to make every day, Brown writes. It's the choice to show up and be real. It's the choice to be honest. It's the choice to let our true selves be seen. It's the daily practice of letting go and embracing who we really are. Now, I know that in our society it is better to be a neat person. I am not a neat person often. I know that I'm supposed to be good at filing, and I am not, as was very clearly made clear recently. So I will spend the last week of this month doing it here, and then a lot of July doing it at home. Those circumstances dictate that I be good at doing a lot of different things, for example, around the house. I have come to just embrace the fact that I just am frightfully unmechanical. Like unbelievably unmechanical sometimes. This was brought home to me when my last meeting with my beloved grandchild, I had bought a beautiful bubble-producing unicorn. And we were going to sit outside and do bubbles until I realized that the unicorn required some assembly. And I'd been a parent long enough to realize you always look and see if there's some assembly required, but I had not done this. And it required a screwdriver and batteries and all kinds of things. And I knew that it would be unwise to leave this 18-month-old at this very mobile age to go find these things and take care of it. So we had to just look at the unicorn. And let me tell you, that was really an imperfect moment. I listened to the first edition of Brown's books a few years ago. I was also at that time playing chaplain to a beloved colleague who was dying of cancer. And I remember at the time just not quite being able to connect with the book. Yet what I appreciate about this second edition that came out more recently is its authenticity, because in it, Brown added new perspectives which address the dialogue and feedback the book had generated within different communities, including the Black community and the LGBTQ community. In the second edition, Brown writes, "Emotional and physical safety are necessary. Dehumanization is a form of daily trauma, and too many people experience that. Many of the systemic forms of trauma are so pervasive that asking people to embrace vulnerability and imperfections without taking into consideration their lived experience can be asking them to do something that is not emotionally or physically safe." So in this Pride Month, we know that many who have been group shamed or identity shamed have this experience. And letting go of perfection allows us to differentiate between shame, which many of ourselves may bring to a situation, and which is about a feeling that inherently we are not enough, and guilt, which is about the realization that we may have done something bad, right? So shame is this feeling that we are bad, and guilt is this feeling that we may have done something bad. Guilt isn't always necessarily bad. It can lead us to action. Shame almost never leads to anything positive. Brown has recently edited a new collection of essays, "You Are Your Best Thing: Vulnerability, Shame, Resilience, and the Black Experience," with Tarana Burke, who is one of the founders of the Me Too movement. Burke tells of the imperfection of their first meeting this way: "When we met, we became instant friends. She talks about how she kissed me and felt bad about it. Afterward, she said to her sister, 'I just kissed the lady whose life revolves around consent, and I didn't ask her permission.'" Burke and Brown overcame that, and they launched into this project at Burke's invitation because she knew the cost of admitting imperfection for those whose life is outside the cultural norm can be really difficult, but also vital for survival and connection. If we feel as if it's all up to us to control all of it, when we try to be one of those tidy daffodils that Laura sings about, instead of the unruly and restorative clover, we can find ourselves in isolation, and in these times that is especially true. So one of the reasons I wanted this to be my message today is because I believe that we need what Brown talks about: courage and connection, the gifts of imperfection. We are not the people who believe that all things happen for a reason. However, we do know that we may need to use our reason to struggle to find a way to live with what life presents us. When we let go of scarcity, we have a measure of sufficiency, Brown says, and that is part of this embrace. We are not a people of many set spiritual practices, yet as people of high ideals, perhaps what we need to embrace is the kind of self-kindness of honoring our wrinkles, celebrating our imperfections. Brown, who does not embrace a traditional kind of spirituality, offers a definition that many of us might appreciate. She says, "Spirituality is recognizing and celebrating that all are inextricably connected to each other by a power greater than all of us, and that our connection to that power and to one another is grounded in love and compassion. Practicing spirituality brings a sense of perspective, meaning, and purpose to our lives." Faith, she says, is a place of mystery where we find the courage to believe in what we cannot see and the strength to let go of our fear of uncertainty. I believe in this time that is what we are called to be a place, this community, where people can do that, leave their shame at our altar with the flowers that won't be distributed inappropriately, and embrace their inner goodness. Here is the story, the last story of imperfection. It's the story of how this sermon happened. I was in my home office and talking to Laura, and Laura was telling me about her new album and this song, and I said, "Fantastic, let's do a service about that song." And then we couldn't find a date that worked for a really, really, really long time, and some time passed, and then she said, "Oh, what song was it again?" And remember, I'm not good at filing. Even though I have a lot of systems around sermon writing and sermon ideas, couldn't find that piece of paper. I had written the song title down. So then we couldn't find a date for a little bit longer, and finally, we did this sermon, which I'm really glad we did. Because I think, despite all of our mistakes, we are so wonderfully, perfectly imperfect. This world is so imperfect, and no one should tell us anything that we are anything less than beautiful. Every Sunday when we come here, I hope we will remember that we are enough. And so perhaps as we navigate this chaos-colored tapestry, as Laura Zucker put it, we will remember that there is more love somewhere.